Our Healthy Men, the Prostate Cancer Question and Answer radio show. Welcome to Our Healthy Men. I am producer Jade Harrell, and I am extremely excited to be bringing this program to you. This is our very first episode, and in my work, it is my responsibility to ask real questions and to seek out the answers and share the information and the resources that I discover. So I am so excited to have found and connected with two of the most brilliant physicians. They have taken time out of their busy schedules and lives in order to make sure we address this very important conversation. This is the Prostate Cancer Question and Answer program, and we are setting forth to make this a master class so that you are not left with any questions unanswered or not know where to go, where to seek help, where to find resources. All of that is what we will take care of in this program. So it is my great pleasure to introduce your hosts, Dr. Lannis Hall, a radiation oncologist with Siteman Cancer Center.
That's correct.
Yes. And Dr. Arnold Bullock, who is, I say, the foremost urologist on the planet, saving lives every day. We are so grateful for the generous support of the BJH Foundation and their contribution to the Prostate Cancer Coalition so that we can use this program to make a real difference. Be sure to share this with everyone you know, and all the information you can come back and listen to episodes again and again until you have a clear understanding of really the source of cancer in prostate, what your prostate does, understanding our bodies, and ultimately having our best, most vibrant, healthy men. So we'll dive right in today. Thank you both for taking the time out and making this program possible.
Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. We appreciate it. And
Yes.
It's going to be fun.
Did I miss anything? Because I could go as spectacular as you all are.
That was pretty inclusive.
That was good. That was
great.
good. And I know we'll get into more as we go on. So I'm hoping that we can just really start at the beginning, the very beginning, the master plan, so to speak. When we were talking earlier in our planning, Dr. Hall, you said, people don't realize how amazing this prostate is, the amazing prostate. So let's start with that master plan where it all begins. What is the prostate? Let's dive in and have that master class, okay?
Well,
Let's start with you.
Many people have asked, what is the prostate gland? You know, I specialize in treating cancer, particularly prostate cancer and breast cancer, but most men come in and they really don't know the function of the prostate gland. It has an essential function for our reproductive life. We are not able to procreate without the prostate gland. One of the functions of the prostate gland is to make fluid and help the sperm get propulsed into the vaginal canal, and the vaginal canal is very acidic, and the prostate gland has fluid that's alkaline. So so what it does is allow the sperm to survive. So without the prostate gland, without its muscular activity to help to push the fluid into the urethra and then go further, we would not be around.
Wow.
Wow.
So the prostate gland is really critical, but you know, the anatomy is important too. And you know, I would love for Dr. Bullock to kind of tell us where the sauce sits.
Okay.
Right. And what's in this sauce?
So you know, when men
Make it plain for us, Doc.
when men ask me what the prostate does, I say that the prostate is what provides the liquid that you see when you've gotten together with your wife,
Okay.
or you may not see.
Well, then that brings up a precursor question. Is it only present? Is it only present when there is intercourse, or is it whenever there is ejaculation?
So the people have the misconception that the ejaculate comes from the testicles, the balls, the nuts. But really, all that comes from the testicles in terms of the ejaculate are the sperm cells themselves.
Okay.
That's why when a man undergoes a vasectomy, unless he told his significant other that he had a vasectomy, there's no way that she could tell or the partner could tell that the person had a vasectomy. The ejaculate will look and smell and feel the same. You have to look up under the microscope to see that there's not the little sperm cells in it to say, brother, you had a vasectomy.
Right. And I don't know that I would pull anybody aside and say, can I take a look and see?
Yeah,
let me pull out my microscope.
That's right. I'll start keeping one in my purse next to my stunner.
So the reason why you can't tell is because only 5% of the ejaculate comes from the testicles.
Right.
Actually, 80% or so comes from the seminal vesicles. Now we're getting even deeper into anatomy.
Yes.
But the seminal vesicles are two structures that sit behind the prostate and connect to the prostate, and they're considered part of what you take out when you take out a prostate. But 15% itself comes from the prostate itself. But if you look at it all together, the prostate and the seminal vesicles account for 95% of what you see in your ejaculate. So if not for the prostate, as Dr. Hall said, we wouldn't be here.
We wouldn't be here.
That's right.
So then this is even more critical, because if we look at the stats, which we will, and if we look at the impact of prostate cancer and the deadly impact of prostate cancer that has been present, then we really have to be careful about misunderstanding the function. So we're going to get into all of that, and we want to be sure that you're able to send in your questions, make sure you have an understanding, and we'll find those things out and get the answers to you. How do we compare that the function of the prostate in men to what would be the equivalent in a woman? Is there? Do women have prostates?
No. So I don't think there is an equivalent.
We have fluid, but that's a whole nother conversation for another series.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I woun't say that there is an equivalent.
No.
Is it complicated?
No, I just wouldn't say there is an equivalent.
Okay.
In that case, I'd say they meet together to work together to complement each other, but there's not a equal service opportunity going on.
Sure, but they work in concert, just like we are different men and women.
But we're working in concert in that situation. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah.
As I said, the environment in the vagina is for a reason, but for the sperm to survive, that prostate gland had to have that milky fluid that's alkaline, so that that sperm could survive and continue traveling up.
That is. Look how affectionately she speaks of this. You speak of it in love. So when you say how amazing, is this something that starts at birth? Is it there? So as we develop, and I'm speaking from the woman's perspective, as we develop, we start to get breasts and we start to have menstruation. I'm going to be the elementary side of this conversation. You all understand. Is this present in the early from the outset?
So the prostate
is the fluid created from the outset?
Well, I suspect the prostate develops early on in gestation or early on in the development of the fetus.
Okay.
It only develops in the presence of testosterone that's produced by the testicles.
That's correct.
And so by 9-12 weeks of fetal life or gestation, you could see a developed prostate. So the entire structure of the prostate, and when it has to be there, because the prostate sits just below the urinary bladder. And most people are aware of the prostate either because of prostate cancer or because they are having challenges with the passage of their urine.
Yeah. So what role does the prostate play with urinating?
Yeah, that's good, because I want Dr. Bullock to have the opportunity to give us the anatomy.
Okay.
And then we can talk about why the prostate is so important as a man gets older.
That's
yes. So let's talk about that anatomy.
So when you think men and women both have bladders, and just in general anatomy, our kidneys make urine, one on each side. The urine goes from the kidneys down to the bladder by way of a tube called your ureters, ureter, and so the ureters drain into the bladder. The urine leaves the bladder to the outside by way of a tube called your urethra. In women, the urethra goes from the bladder to the outside, the urethral meatus, the opening that you see just above the vagina. In men, we have the same thing. We have a urethra, but the urethra goes from the bladder through the prostatic urethra, down through the bulbous urethra, and then out through the penile urethra. So,
okay, can I break this down? Because there are a lot of urethras.
It was, but I started to make the connection. How would you break it down, Doc?
I would just say, because he said it, but there's a lot of urethras.
Sure,
there's several
but
parts.
we're going to have
But there's
these
a garden hose leading from the bladder out.
Well, then break it down.
And the prostate surrounds that hose, which is where the urine passes. So the urine passes through the middle of the prostate gland, through that garden hose, and then continues on through different names that Dr. Bullock just eloquently called it. Yeah, all the way through.
Urethra.
No, the bulbar, penile.
Right.
well, the prostate surrounds that garden hose, the urethra.
Inside, nearby.
No,
internal.
So think of an orange, and you core out the exact middle of it.
Through.
The urethra is going through the middle of the prostate gland,
and for a reason. Like we said, this is the master plan. I'm not going to ask God a whole bunch of questions.
Well, it makes sense because when a man ejaculates, the prostatic secretions that includes the semen from the testicles gets emitted into the urethra.
right?
So instead of your urine shooting out the end, your sperm shoots out the end.
Man, MoDOT would love the design schematics for this thing here. They could really use that.
It's amazing because it has to close off so it doesn't go back up into the bladder. So I mean, it's a divine it's a divine construction. What's going on there? There's a lot going on.
There is a lot going on. How many different mechanisms, how many different combinations and processes that had to be in place just for each one of us to exist. It's phenomenal. So you mentioned the role of testosterone, you mentioned that it doesn't become relevant, so to speak, until the onset of or introduction of testosterone, which comes in later years. Well,
testosterone is actually there in our developmental stages, before we're born. But soon after birth, within the first couple of years, a male's testosterone goes almost to castrate level. So from between ages of 2 and 12 or 2 or 13, the testosterone level is very low.
Hey, don't need it, don't you?
But that's male puberty.
Okay.
Male puberty is when your testosterone surges, and the testosterone leads to the development of your secondary sex characteristics, and you say that boy is going through puberty.
Yes.
You can look at his pubic hair. You can tell the boy, are you putting on deodorant? You know, wash your tail and put on some deodorant. So that's puberty.
Yeah.
And so you can tell when a young teenager is going through puberty because some 6th graders have hair up under their arm and they pull down the shorts. They have hair around their genitals, and some 6th graders or 5th graders don't. It's pretty obvious.
You can tell. It's real clear.
As men get older, their prostate glands enlarge.
Right.
It is absolutely happening to the majority of men by the age of 50 years old, and by 80 years old, it's almost all men have an enlargement of their prostate gland, and it can be quite variable who has problems with that enlargement, because remember, we've got that garden hose running through the middle, and that enlargement is coming from a part of the prostate gland called the transitional zone. And so there can be some symptoms of men getting up more frequently at night, not feeling as though they're emptying their bladder completely, having some urgency with urination. And I think we ought to talk about that, because that's even more confusing, because many men think they must have a prostate cancer because they've got a problem with how they're passing their urine, but it's actually a natural phase of life for you to have what's called benign prostatic hypertrophy, which is when you get benign overgrowth of prostate tissue that can impact how you pass your urine.
Sure.
So I wanted Dr. Bullock to really talk to that, because so many men go through it and they notice a difference every decade through life of having more issues with urination.
Well, this is why we designed the program, to get into the very specifics, and we're going from one episode all the way up to a dozen so that we can make sure that you understand all these various components. So today, yes, we are focusing on anatomy. So as it pertains to anatomy for this conversation, is there anything else that we need to bring into perspective so folks understand what this is and how it works?
So let's talk more about the prostate. So because the prostate, people know about the prostate from several points of view. One, prostatic enlargement, either told that their prostate's enlarged, but just because you have an enlarged prostate does not mean that your prostate causes blockage.
Okay. Is that something you can see?
You can't, you can't see someone's prostate. No.
Well, when we say enlarged, if you got a
so think
anywhere
about
else on your body, you might think. So as a layman,
we commonly say
that would occur. Yeah.
We say commonly that the prostate is the size of a walnut.
Okay.
But I find that most men, by the time I see them in my clinic, their prostate is larger than a walnut size, because most men have some benign prostatic hypertrophy as they get older. So it can be quite large. So it can be the size of an apricot, really big, and be even larger than that. So, usually 25 to 35 grams, if you could think about that size. I know people can't really think about that size. Let's go back to a walnut. But then it can be much larger than that size. And as Dr. Bullock said, you can have a very enlarged prostate and still pass urine okay. It all depends on how it's pushing on that urethra.
Okay, so that goes to that function question.
Right. Yes. But some men have a normal sized prostate and have trouble urinating.
Isn't that something? Okay.
And that's because the prostate is surrounded by a muscular wall around it. I always tell people, think about a prostate like a grapefruit. I mean, it's not as big as a grapefruit generally, but you have fruit in the middle where it's soft and spongy per se, and then you have a thick rind around it. That's the prostate.
Okay.
So when we think about the prostate capsule, the wall around the prostate, think about a rind around the grapefruit. But the prostate is an interesting thing. Men find that it's impossible to ejaculate and urinate at the same time.
Okay.
Why is that?
Because
you can't ejaculate and urinate at the same time because just as part of the prostate sits underneath the urinary bladder. You have to say urinary bladder because people say, oh, no, I don't have a bladder. Mine's been taken out because of stones. They're thinking of a gallbladder.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. But I'm not, you guys laugh, but that was really
the wrong part of the body.
And they're not even in the same
They're not even in the same vicinity. It's like, we talk about, where are we?
So
you over in Florissant.
Right.
Out here in St. Louis.
But, people say that all the time.
But I'm glad you made that distinction.
Doc, I don't have my bladder. I'd say, raise your shirt. Let me see what your stoma look like. Your bag. Where's your bag?
Exactly.
So,
exactly. This is why it's important that those distinctions are made. We are actually gonna unearth some things, some myths, some miseducation.
So, and you try not to laugh in your office, but sometimes it's comical.
Well, at least we can here. Yeah.
So the urinary bladder is down in your pelvis. It's if you punch somebody in their pubic bone right above their penis, if they didn't have that pubic bone, you'd be punching them in their prostate. Okay. That's where your prostate is. So your pubic bone
is before the bladder, underneath the bladder.
Underneath the bladder.
That's a great image.
That bone. If you're on your belly button, you just start pushing your hand down low. That's the pubic bone below your belly button.
Got it.
And so your prostate sits right behind the pubic bone. And right above the pubic bone, when you need to pee and you push right there, you're playing with your spouse and you're playing a joke. And they need to pee, and you go pushing on that area just below the belly button. They'll be like, "Oh, don't do that. You're gonna make me pee."
Yeah.
So that's where your bladder is. And so there's a muscle between the bottom of the bladder, called the base of the bladder, and the top of the prostate, in reverse, the base of the prostate. And so when a man gets ready to ejaculate, that muscle closes off. Because if that muscle didn't close off, when you ejaculate, your ejaculate could go 3 centimeters or 1.5 inches up into your bladder, or 5 inches out all the way out to the end. Of course, it'd rather go backwards than forwards.
Right.
So if that
it has that purpose.
That muscle has to close off. This is the whole basis of why we're doing this show.
Got it.
That the prostate is such an important organ, but people don't understand it.
Right.
They don't know what it is. They don't know where it is. What does it do? Why should I worry about it? Well, you should worry about it from point of view benign conditions, and then we're going to spend the bulk of our shows talking about prostate cancer. But in terms
benign meaning what's
benign,
benign
no cancer.
Got it.
You might have problems from the prostate, but it's not related to the cancer.
So benign means it's keeping cool.
Right. and the majority of people who have symptoms from their prostate, those symptoms are not related to prostate cancer.
Fantastic.
So I know we're not talking about prostate cancer, but generally speaking, every show we should say prostate cancer does not usually cause any symptoms until it's spread to some other part of your body and you're having symptoms because of cancer somewhere else.
So it doesn't affect your sexual function, your sensation.
That's a shameful thing. Well, it's not shameful. I mean, I guess that's not bad, but people who have prostate cancer or benign prostatic enlargement or any other problem, they generally don't have symptoms from cancer. So prostate symptoms occur because of that tightness or that narrowing of the prostate around that garden hose, around the urethra. And so because you can't empty your bladder, you generally have a slow urinary stream. You get up oftentimes at night or urinate small volumes. When you urinate, it may take a long time to get started. You may stop and start. You may have to strain. That's the sole reason why when you go to a baseball game, never ever stand behind the average 80-year-old guy. You'd rather stand behind 2 or 3 20-year-olds than one 80-year-old.
Wow.
Because it's going to take him 30, 40 seconds to get started. And I mean, it's,
No, and they're going to sit there.
And they're going to stay there for a while.
I have patients that say, and I think I'm done. And then I have to go back because I haven't emptied completely, and then I'm dribbling. So it's really annoying.
Yeah.
What you're saying is that's a natural part that comes with aging.
Well,
could be.
That's sort of like saying that as you get older, you can't walk. I mean, it's common as you get older, but it's not a normal part of aging.
Okay.
And just like men say they lose their erections as they get older. Is that normal? Well, that's not normal.
Okay.
Just like it's not normal to have a heart attack. It's common as you get older, but it's not normal. So the problem becomes because that prostate tightens around that urethra, you can't empty your bladder. And
Does that mean you also can't ejaculate?
No. These guys can still ejaculate. Sometimes they ejaculate. Sometimes they say, Doc, I have a climax. It feels great. And then 4 minutes later, my ejaculate eventually oozes out of my penis. And that's because the prostate's tight.
Shows up later.
So just because just like the urine has a hard time getting out, the ejaculate has a hard time getting out. So most men who have prostate cancer are asymptomatic. They don't know. But most men who have an enlarged, tight prostate, they have these, what we call obstructive voiding symptoms.
Sure. And the prostate gets tight, if I'm hearing you correctly, as we age.
As we get older. So 60 to 60%. Yeah, so 50 to 60% of men will have an enlarged prostate gland by the age of 60. And that number is up to about 90% by the age of 80. So I want to hear about all the options because, of course, I know we have what's called a transurethral resection of the prostate, but we call it the roto-rooter in my clinic. And that is when you actually do a surgical procedure. But before that, we actually have medications that we commonly put patients on that either reduce the size of the prostate or relax the urethra so that you can pass your urine better. But I just think we have to on this show, because we're going to move to prostate cancer, or most of our other shows, we have to talk about
what to do with
what to do with these
prostate.
symptoms because they're so common.
90% of our men by the time they're 80 years old. Yeah. So what can you do when your prostate's tight?
Well, we think of drugs and we think of how popular some drugs are. And most men have heard of this drug called Flomax, but it's just one of many drugs we call alpha blockers, and they're designed to relax the smooth muscles of your prostate and of the prostatic capsule and bladder neck. And by relaxing these smooth muscles, instead of the prostate being under increased tone, you basically are, you're expanding you're relaxing the capsule of the prostate such that center hole of the donut is not as tight.
Right.
Okay.
So the urethra relaxes.
Does that diminish the strength of it? So, for example, if I'm relating it in the layman's term as a kind of muscle relaxant
Right.
for your prostate, does that then create an atrophy that doesn't? Okay, so it'll still be. It's just right now it's too tight and
Right.
you need to take it right.
Relaxing it.
Now, keep in mind,
take a chill prostate. Yeah.
by the time most people have problems with their prostate, they're not the guys trying to have any more children. And so if any way you have of relaxing the prostate or decreasing prostate volume, that's a good thing. So more people take one of these drugs called alpha blockers, and there's many drugs now on the market that are effective. You take one pill at night, generally speaking, at least 50% of the people are dramatically improved with just that one pill. I would say more upwards of probably 75% of people get some benefit, but half of the people are completely resolved or completely asymptomatic on the pill. And so for those who are not adequately satisfied with their improvement on just the alpha blocker, there's another group of medicines that prevents, getting a little deeper, the conversion of testosterone to dihydrotestosterone. And it's actually the dihydrotestosterone that actually causes your prostate to grow and develop.
Right.
We say testosterone, but really it's a metabolite of testosterone that really does the work.
And let's be
Is that
clear.
related to metabolism in any way?
Well, let's be clear that that's happening in the prostate cancers. I mean, the prostate gland. That's not happening kind of in the body.
Okay.
This is happening.
It's doing its own.
Intracellularly. So it's the conversion of the
blocking
the conversion of testosterone to dihydrotestosterone, and it's that DHT that causes that prostate gland overgrowth. So people know this medication as finasteride or Proscar or dutasteride or Avodart. And
Sure.
These are very common medications too. And I find it interesting to see when some urologists will pick that medication first based on the gland size and may pick alpha blocker, or Flomax more commonly. What
would you do?
It really does depend on the gland size and what you think the cause of their restriction is, right?
So is there a natural step before you would prescribe? Or are there things that they could do in general?
So, there are medications, and when the FDA approves a medication, the amount of money and the amount of studies and the amount of men in the thousands that have to be studied to prove that this drug is effective and safe.
Right.
No question. And most drugs are covered by insurances. But there are a lot of men who will take products based on ads that they see on the internet or by prominent people on the radio. That's a bunch of crap. With literally no evidence of effectiveness. And they'll call it these names, to improve your prostate health. And I always wonder, I said, sir, how could you tell if your prostate is healthier? I mean, what would be your sign that it's healthier? I mean, do you pee green urine?
Yeah.
Do you have your color of your ejaculate changes color? You can't tell. So most of these things that you see that you'll get in a bottle that called, Prostate Health or Prostate Plus or whatever. You look at the back of it and you look at a men's formula vitamin from Snooks. You look at the two things. Well, they sound like the same thing.
But not necessarily.
Now, there are some supplements that are certainly effective, like saw palmetto.
Right.
I'm familiar.
And so that's got to be the most popular. And in German studies, there's evidence that saw palmetto is beneficial. But in the U.S. trials, because nutritional supplements aren't monitored, aren't controlled by the FDA,
That's right.
You're not sure what you're getting from bottle to bottle.
And then when we think of, in the early days, I said if you're not going to use it, you'll lose it, or if you're not going to loose it, so to speak, you don't need to use it. Would having regular ejaculation into your older years be something that conditions or helps the prostate stay healthy? Is that Is there any connection or parallel there?
I know of no connection.
There have been studies that look at your risk of prostate cancer. Does it happen?
Are you talking about prostate cancer or just
prostate
prostate health?
prostate
I'm just talking about,
about prostate health.
So they've looked at these and say it makes no difference whether or not you're married or single, thinking one of them probably has sex. I don't know which one gets more sex. They marry one or the single one. They looked at it related to sexually transmitted diseases or history of such. None of them play a correlation. So whether or not you ejaculate 5 times a day or 5 times a year, there's no evidence that one is
does anything
better than another.
Fantastic.
So when do you need a green laser light? Or
what is that?
So we have.
See, now we're breaking out the good stuff.
The shameful thing is that men don't present for preventive health care at the same rate as women.
Share one of your stories.
They just don't. You know, a man could have, urinary leakage. He could race to the bathroom and not make it and urinate on himself. And not realize that you could see your primary doctor or urologist and find out you have an overactive bladder, take 1 pill a day, and all of a sudden you're not wetting yourself anymore. A man could get up 4 times doing a movie and not ever want to go to a symphony because he can't sit through the whole thing until intermission, and go see his primary doctor, not even a urologist, just any doctor, and say, Doc, I have to, when I urinate, I tell everybody on both sides of me at the baseball game, look, don't be at that urinal because I'm going to mess up your shoes, brother. And why would you do that when you can take a single pill? But what if the pills don't work? Then we have, like we mentioned, the Roto-Rooter, where you go in through the urethra with someone asleep, and we can core open that hole again. You can open up the donut hole, and the urine could flow through the hole easier.
And problem solved.
You could use newer technologies, not to say always newer is better, but there's a laser ablation. So instead of cutting it out, we could use laser energy and vaporize the prostate tissue. You could use freezing therapy, where you could freeze it at such a temperature that you cause necrosis or death to tissue just by exposing it to temperatures it's extremely cold.
That's incredible. So there are options there.
A ton of them.
So many that I'm just curious. Quickly, which one do you think is best, or what do? Because there's so many.
What's your treatment of choice?
So a person has problems where they have to stay on aspirin, they have to stay on a blood thinner. Then you're going to use a laser, because a laser operates under such high energy that you don't have to worry about the bleeding afterwards. The blood loss is minimal. Whereas anyone who's over the age of 50, 55, they have a really enlarged obstructed prostate. And if their PSA is anywhere over the range of 3, me personally, I like to still do the transurethral resection, the Roto-Rooter, because we send tissue to the lab, and they can tell me if there's any cancer
so it serves both
in the prostate tissue. And it's definitive. You do it, the next day the catheter comes out, they urinate like they're 20 years younger.
Wow. That's incredible. Well, I'm sure that this brings about some greater understanding. I know it did. It was very enlightening for me. If you had the takeaway, if you could pull a brother aside right now and say, okay, out of understanding your prostate and what it is, this thing I really want you to understand more than anything else.
I would say that your prostate gland is a necessary, essential organ, that prostate health begins with understanding what your body does and why. And that when you're starting to have changes in your prostate gland, you shouldn't just ignore it, because what we're trying to explain to you is there are simple solutions to what is a normal process or a common process as you get older. We are not talking about prostate cancer today, but there's a lot of reasons why you need to pay attention to what's going on with your GU tract or your genital urinary tract, the way your urine flows. That's just important to say, is this changing? Is this right? Is this good? You've got to pay attention to yourself.
Yeah, I love that. Paying attention. Doc, what's your takeaway?
Well, the prostate is responsible for so much of our sense of good health. Not only prostate cancer, but just having enlarged prostate or troubles with fertility. And so the only way you know about your prostate is by seeing your doctor and by presenting your symptoms. The problem with most prostate ailments is men are so embarrassed to go and tell their doctor.
They're private.
or honestly, I don't mean the word ignorant in a bad way, but we're ignorant over the fact of how most complaints that we have in medicine, there's some treatment for.
Sure.
And why would people live through getting up 5 times a night? Why would you live through wetting yourself? Why would you live through not being able to do some activities only because you're too afraid to tell your doctor about this?
Well, that's the thing about ignorance. It's temporary, and it's a state of unknowing. And so this is why we're here today, to make sure that you do know. And once you do, that knowledge is yours, and your prostate health and your greater potential is also. Dr. Landis Hall, Dr. Arnold Bullock for Our Healthy Men Prostate Cancer Question and Answer Show. You can find out more at Prostate Cancer Coalition, STL.org. And again, we just want to say special thanks, a great deal of thanks for our generous donations of the Prostate Cancer Coalition by the BJH Foundation for making this program possible. Stay tuned as we go in deeper. Our next conversation is the statistics, the changes, the conditions, and prostatitis. All of those very important topics. Now that we understand what it is, what it does, now we can talk about what happens when it's not doing exactly what we expect it to do. So we'll talk to you next time. Thank you. Our Healthy Men is another positive production of Rare Gem Productions. Thanks for listening.